"We don't need old men like you dragging us down," she said, tossing her pen onto the desk as if my presence was a minor inconvenience. My name is Arthur Finch. I'm 62 years old and had been the production director at Carson Foundry in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for the past 22 years. Not the kind of man who sought the spotlight or dominated conversations, just the steady force that ensured the furnaces never cooled at a company that cast essential parts for a third of the country's infrastructure. I just gave a thin, knowing smile, gave a single nod, and walked out of Chloe's office. No outbursts, no pleading, no scene. Just emptied my desk with a methodical calm while the younger team members found sudden, intense interest in their computer screens. A few of them had started here sweeping floors as kids, now grown with responsibilities of their own, and I'd taught each one everything they knew, but not a soul spoke up as I packed 22 years of my life into a single plastic crate. Robert Carson had forged the company from nothing 47 years ago, began with a single kiln in a rented shed, built it into a $40 million enterprise through sheer determination and a name synonymous with unbreakable quality. He'd personally chosen me to lead production when his energy began to wane. "You're the only one who understands the metal, Art," he'd said. "You listen to it." His son, Chloe, 31 years old with an economics degree and 3 years working in Los Angeles, had decided the company needed aggressive restructuring and dynamic new leadership, code for purging anyone who understood that some things can't be optimized on a graph. As I carried that sad crate of my belongings to my car, I felt an unexpected peace. Because what Chloe didn't know, what he hadn't even thought to ask, was that my employment agreement contained a very particular provision, one that Robert himself had insisted on to prevent me from being lured away, a severance penalty equal to 30 months' salary if I was terminated without cause. I set the crate on the passenger seat and sat for a long moment, hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel. Through the windshield, I could see the casting floor, the machinery I'd calibrated with my own hands, the workflows I'd designed, the people I'd mentored, all about to discover what happens when the institutional memory is escorted out the door. I didn't punch the dashboard, didn't peel out of the lot. I just started the engine, shifted into drive, and headed home to call Martin Croft, an attorney I'd known for decades who'd been itching for a clean corporate fight. This was clean. I'd never been one for dramatics. Married for 32 years to my wife Eleanor before a stroke took her 2 years ago. Raised a son who's a surgeon in Seattle and a daughter who's a social worker in Boston. My life was built on dependability and patience, the same qualities I'd poured into Carson Foundry. Robert Carson had been more than a boss. In many ways, he was the mentor I never had, my own father having passed when I was 14, leaving my mother to support 4 daughters on a hairdresser's wages. Robert took a gamble on me when I was 40, fresh from the closure of a steel mill with nothing but calloused hands and an associate's degree in metallurgy. "Diplomas don't pour steel, Art," he'd said in my interview. "Men with patience and a feel for the heat do." He'd made me production director within 18 months. Robert and I didn't socialize outside the plant, but there was a deep, unspoken respect between us. When Eleanor got sick, he was the one who quietly arranged for a flexible schedule so I could be with her for every doctor's appointment. Family comes first, Art. Always. The first sign of trouble came about 18 months ago when Chloe began appearing in meetings, fresh from the coast, clutching a tablet and smelling of expensive cologne, talking about leveraging core competencies and paradigm shifts. I'd see Robert flinch at his suggestions, ideas that would have compromised our material integrity or outsourced our finishing work, processes we'd always kept in-house. But he never corrected him in front of others, just quietly smoothed things over afterwards. "You needs to learn, Art," he told me once, leaning in my doorway. "Some lessons aren't found in a textbook." The second warning was when Robert announced his semi-retirement 5 months ago. Doctor's orders, he said, though I suspected it was more about yielding to Chloe's relentless pressure. He looked weary when he handed me the new org chart with Chloe's name as CEO. "I made him swear to keep the senior team together," he said, avoiding my gaze. "The history you all have is what holds this place together." I just nodded, but a cold knot formed in my stomach at the way Robert couldn't look me in the eye, like he knew it was coming, but was powerless to stop it. The morning after my termination, I was at my kitchen table going over my contract with Martin when my phone rang. Robert's name flashed on the screen. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. But 22 years of loyalty doesn't just evaporate. Art? His voice was strained. What in God's name happened yesterday? Ask your son, I said, my tone flat, not accusatory, just factual. I did. He said you were resistant to the new vision, that you were poisoning the well with the shift foreman. I said nothing, let the silence hang between us. Robert knew me better than that, knew I'd never undermined anyone in my life. You're going to file, aren't you? He finally asked. Already have. Martin Croft is on it. Robert exhaled, a long, tired sound. I told him to review the contracts, told him before I left that there were safeguards in place. Another pause. He said he streamlined yesterday. You, Margaret, Ben, anyone with more than 20 years in. My jaw clenched. Margaret had been our head of quality assurance for 15 years. Ben was our master pattern maker, an artist with sand and resin, both utterly irreplaceable. Is that the vision you had, Robert? Purging everyone who built this place with you? You know it's not, he said, his voice thin, but I gave him the reins. It's his to steer now. I heard voices in the background on his end, one of them clearly Chloe's, impatient and clipped. I have to go, Art. The call ended abruptly. I set the phone down and looked at the contract spread before me. Clause 17, subsection B. In the event of termination without documented cause, as defined in Addendum B, employee shall be entitled to severance compensation equal to 30 months of current gross salary. Martin had circled it in red. It's ironclad, he'd said. They'll pay or we'll go to court where we'll win, and they'll pay my fees too. I walked to the window overlooking my small garden. The oak tree Eleanor and I had planted as a sapling when we bought this house 28 years ago now dominated the view. We'd nursed it through drought and a brutal ice storm, staked it, nourished it, given it what it needed to grow strong. Something solidified inside me. This wasn't about a paycheck anymore. It was about principle, about understanding that a foundation isn't something you pour once and forget. It's something you respect and maintain before you try to build a skyscraper on top of it. I picked up my phone and called Margaret, then Ben. By 1 o'clock, I'd spoken to every senior employee Chloe had let go. Some were terrified, others were incandescent with rage, all of them anxious about providing for their families. Take a breath, I told each one. Check your contracts, call Martin. Then I made my last call to Franklin Moss, owner of Keystone Fabrication on the other side of the city, a man who'd been offering me a job since the day we'd met. Still open to that discussion? I asked him. 3 days after being fired, I sat across from Chloe and a corporate lawyer for Carson Foundry in a sleek downtown conference room. Martin Croft, 70 years old, with the patience of a glacier, sat beside me, my contract open on the table. This is absurd, Chloe said, not even glancing at the document. We're pursuing a new strategic path. That's cause enough. Martin, the patience of a glacier, simply tapped the circled clause. Termination without cause, as meticulously defined in Addendum B, triggers a severance equal to 30 months of current gross salary. In Mr. Finch's case, that's approximately $450,000. The corporate lawyer, a young man named Brandon who looked like he'd just passed the bar, scanned the contract with growing unease. Mr. Carson, the definition of cause here is exceptionally narrow. Gross negligence, fraud, felony conviction. He was an obstacle to progress, Chloe interrupted, crossing his arms. That's insubordination. Where is the documentation? Martin asked. Written reprimands? Performance reviews citing these issues? Addendum B requires a documented history, not a subjective opinion. Brandon flipped through a nearly empty folder in front of him, finding nothing. Chloe's face tightened. Fine, we'll offer 12 months severance. Take it or leave it. I remained silent, watching him. In that moment, he had his father's stubborn brow, but Robert's stubbornness was always about building something stronger. Chloe's seemed bent on dismantling. Martin closed his leather portfolio. Then we will proceed with litigation. Discovery will be particularly illuminating, I should think, regarding the coordinated termination of multiple long-tenured employees. Brandon's eyes widened slightly. He leaned in and whispered something urgent to Chloe, who brushed him off. Before you make threats, Chloe said to me, ignoring Martin completely, you should know we're prepared to litigate this for years. You'll be tied up, bled dry. I finally spoke. I've got the time. And we'll make sure everyone knows you're litigious. Good luck finding another job at your age. That's when his father appeared in the doorway. I hadn't seen Robert since his farewell lunch. He looked frailer, but his eyes were clear and sharp. Chloe? His voice was quiet, but firm. A word. We're in the middle of something, Dad. Now. It wasn't a request. They stepped outside. Through the glass wall, I could see them arguing. Robert gesturing with a sharp stabbing motion, Chloe's posture becoming defensive. When they returned, Chloe wouldn't meet my eyes. Brandon, Robert said, prepare the severance agreement, as it is written in the contract. Dad, Chloe started. Not now. Robert turned to me. I apologize, Arthur. This is not how I intended things to end. I gave a single nod. Nothing more needed to be said between us. As Martin and I stood to leave, Chloe stepped in front of me. This isn't over. I'll be auditing all our supplier contracts. Any firm that hires you can forget about doing business with Carson. Robert went pale but said nothing. I just nodded again, thinking of my conversation with Franklin Moss the day before about the partnership he'd proposed, about the specialized high-tolerance casting work Carson had been neglecting that Keystone was perfectly positioned to exploit. You're right about one thing, I told him. It isn't over. The severance Binnard hit my account a week later. $450,000, minus taxes. More money than it ever had at one time. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt empty. The money wasn't a point. Revenge wasn't really either. It was about something more fundamental. That same afternoon, I met Margaret Sheehan, our former head of QA, at a quiet coffee shop. The place was nearly empty. Martin got me 18 months severance. Not your deal, but it'll do. They want a 5-year NDA. Can't discuss proprietary methods or internal operations. She gave a hollow laugh. 30 years ensuring nothing leaves this plant faulty, and now I'm the security risk. Are you signing it?
Don't have much choice. My son's got special needs. The therapy isn't cheap. I slid a business card across the table. Franklin Moss, Keystone Fabrication. He's looking for a consultant, I said. Someone with an impeccable eye for metallurgical standards. No NDA required. She stared at the card. Carson would sue me into the ground. Not if you're consulting on general industry best practices. There's nothing proprietary about quality. She pocketed the card slowly. What's going on, Arthur? This isn't like you. I hadn't told anyone about my arrangement with Franklin yet, but Margaret deserved the truth. We'd trusted each other with safety for over a decade. I'm partnering with Keystone, I said quietly. Franklin is bringing me in to launch a new division, high-tolerance, specialty castings, the complex, small-run work Chloe thinks is inefficient. The custom orders. Robert always said that was our future. And Chloe is killing it to focus on high-volume production, thinks he can compete with foreign foundries on price. He can't, Margaret said flatly, not with our overhead. I know. I leaned forward. I had a beer with Ben yesterday. He said Chloe's been liquidating equipment. The new precision sand handling system Robert invested in last year for the custom work. He's already sold most of it off. That's millions in equipment, Margaret whispered, her eyes wide. At auction prices, he'd be lucky to get 40 cents on the dollar. Margaret sat back, understanding dawning. He's asset stripping, turning everything into cash. I nodded. And guess who just bought a penthouse condo in L.A.? My God, Margaret said, running a hand through her hair. Does Robert know? I doubt it. He built that company as a legacy, not a liquidation sale. We sat in silence, both absorbing the implications, not just for us, but for the 120 people still at Carson, for Robert's life's work. What are you going to do? Margaret finally asked. I'm building something better, I said simply, something that honors tradition and innovation. With Franklin Moss? Margaret sounded skeptical. Franklin is the capital. He's 5 years from retirement and wants to back operational people who know what they're doing, then step aside. I paused. And I need a quality director who knows the difference between a good pour and a great one. She studied me. This isn't just business for you, is it? It's personal. It's about worth, about building something that endures. That's all I've ever known how to do. 2 months after my firing, I sat in Franklin Moss's office reviewing blueprints. A converted machine shop on the south side of Pittsburgh would house Aegis Castings, our new venture focused on custom, high-specification foundry work. The name was Margaret's idea. Aegis means protection, she said. That's what we provide. Integrity. Franklin, a bear of a man with a thick gray mustache and suspenders, spread supplier manifests across his desk. Raw material suppliers are confirmed, he said. They can deliver the first alloy batch by the 15th. The new furnace engineer starts Monday. He gave me a look. Former Carson employee. Said you recommended us.
I nodded. Leo Petrov had been at Carson for 8 years, a genius with thermal dynamics, chronically underappreciated. Chloe had slashed his department's R&D budget while increasing his own expense account. Leo had resigned a week prior. How many does that make now? Franklin asked. 9, I replied. All of them top tier. Franklin whistled low. Carson's bleeding talent. Fast. People follow competence, I said. Chloe isn't providing it. My phone buzzed. A text from Ben, still working in Carson's pattern shop, but keeping me informed. With his pension vested, he couldn't afford to walk away yet, but he could watch. The message was a photo of an internal quality report. Failure rates up 300%, 2 major clients rejecting entire shipments, production delays stretching into weeks. I showed it to Franklin, who adjusted his glasses. Right on schedule, he said. The exodus is hitting their output. I pocketed my phone, feeling no triumph. Carson employed good people, people I'd known for decades, people with car payments and tuition bills. Their pain wasn't my objective. We should reach out to North Star Engineering, I said, naming one of Carson's flagship clients. Let them know we'll be fully operational in 45 days. Franklin nodded, making a note. Already did. Their head of procurement is eager to talk. They're desperate for a reliable domestic source. I stood and walked to the window overlooking the shop floor below. Workers were assembling the first furnace, the beginnings of something new, something built on a foundation of respect for both experience and new ideas. My phone rang. Robert Carson's name on the screen. I should take this, I told Franklin, who nodded and stepped out. Robert, I answered. Arthur, his voice was weary, defeated. We need to talk. I'm listening. A heavy sigh. I know what you're doing. The new company, the Carson people you're hiring. I said nothing. It wasn't illegal, wasn't unethical. It was the market. I'm not calling to ask you to stop. I'm calling to ask for your help. That surprised me. What kind of help? The kind that might save what's left of my company. He paused. Chloe's been liquidating capital, ignoring quality protocols. The board is nervous, so am I. Why tell me this? Because you're the only one who knows the heart of that operation, the only one who might see a way out of this. Another pause. And because I should have listened to you when you warned me he was in over his head. I closed my eyes. I thought of all those years with Robert.
The trust, the pride in what we had built together, something that supported hundreds of families who depended on our sound judgment. What exactly are you asking, Robert? Come to my house tonight, 8 o'clock. Bring Margaret if she's willing. The board wants to meet to discuss options. Options? Yes, Robert's voice firmed slightly. Including a change in leadership. I looked down at the shop floor again, at our small but growing operation, at the future I was building from the ashes of disrespect. I'll be there, I said finally, but I'm not promising anything. Fair enough. The relief in his voice was palpable. And Arthur. Yes? Thank you for still taking my calls. 6 months after being fired, I stood at the rear of Carson Foundry's main conference room. The emergency all-hands meeting had just been called to order, with Chloe at the head of the table, flanked by his new management team, all of them looking tense. I wasn't supposed to speak until the end. That was the agreement with the board. Let Chloe present his disastrous quarterly results. Let him try to explain the 42% drop in revenue, the lost clients, the warranty claims piling up. He was midway through a presentation blaming global economic pressures and entrenched union attitudes when he noticed me. "What is he doing here?" he demanded, jabbing a finger in my direction. Robert, sitting quietly among the board members, nodded to the chairman, an elderly man named Mr. Sterling. "Chloe," the chairman said, standing, "the board has reached a decision regarding the company's leadership." His face went white. "You can't be serious." "Mr. Finch," the chairman continued, turning to me, "would you care to explain the new arrangement?" I stepped forward, holding a folder, the same one Martin had prepared for my severance months before, but now filled with very different documents. "Effective today," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the quiet room, "Carson Foundry is being acquired by Aegis Castings. The board has approved the merger agreement this morning." Chloe laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "This is ridiculous. I'm the majority shareholder." "No," Robert said, standing slowly. "You hold 25%. I maintained 55%, which I've now voted in favor of the merger." I slid the folder across the table to him. "Aegis will absorb Carson's specialty casting division. The remaining high-volume production will continue under new management." I glanced at the door. "My management." Margaret said, stepping into the room from the hallway. Chloe flipped through the documents, his hands trembling. This is business," I finished for him. "Nothing personal." A year after the merger, I stood on the mezzanine of the expanded foundry that now housed both Aegis Castings and Carson Precision Works. The rumble of machinery was a symphony of productivity I had deeply missed. Robert joined me, leaning on his cane. His health was stable, but his spirit was renewed. Seeing the company recover had been his true medicine. "Quarterly numbers are in," he said, handing me a tablet. "Best in 6 years." I nodded, scanning the figures. Margins were up, employee turnover was down, and we'd just landed a landmark contract for a new municipal bridge project. "Chloe called last week," Robert said quietly. "He'd taken his buyout and moved to California without a backward glance. He's starting a venture capital firm, asked if I'd be an investor." I raised an eyebrow, but stayed silent. "Will you?" Robert shook his head. "Told him to come back to Pittsburgh first. Learn the business from the ground up, the way I did. The way you did." He smiled sadly. "He hung up on me. But he called back this morning. Asked if the offer still stood." Below us, I watched Leo fine-tuning the temperature controls on a furnace. Margaret, in her white lab coat, inspecting a fresh pour with a critical eye. Ben at a drafting table, sketching a modification to a complex pattern. Experience and innovation, side by side. Not in conflict, not one replacing the other, but building something stronger, together. "You know," Robert said, "when I wrote that severance clause into your contract, I never imagined it would lead to this." I allowed myself a small smile.
Neither did I. We stood in a comfortable silence, watching the company we'd both dedicated our lives to continue its work. Some lessons come with a high price tag, but the ones that truly change you, the ones that redefine your understanding of value and legacy, those are always worth the cost.